Matthew Morales knew his alien secretary was in mating season the moment he stepped into his office on Nexus 7. The pungent, sweet aroma hit him like a sledgehammer, making his head spin and his vision blur. Fornax, his usually composed Arcturian assistant, stood before him, her skin a violent shade of purple instead of its typical cool blue. "Fornax, what's going on?" Matthew asked, steadying himself against the doorframe. The Arcturian's response came as a series of incomprehensible clicks and growls. Her universal translator hung uselessly around her neck, its lights dark and unresponsive. Matthew's comm unit buzzed. It was the Alien Resources Department. "Mr. Morales, we've detected abnormal pheromone levels in your office. Your Arcturian secretary has entered her biennial mating season. We strongly advise granting her immediate leave. Arcturians become extremely aggressive and possessive during this time." Matthew's mind raced. The negotiations with the Zeta Reticuli Trade Federation were at a critical juncture. Fornax held key information about the deal. He couldn't afford to let her go, not now. "I appreciate the concern, but I need her here. We'll manage," Matthew replied, ending the call. As the day progressed, Matthew realized his mistake. Fornax's behavior grew increasingly erratic. She snarled at anyone who approached him, baring sharp teeth that seemed to have appeared overnight. When his comm unit buzzed again, Fornax leaped across the desk, snatching it from his hand and crushing it beneath her suddenly powerful grip. The office door slid open, revealing Commander Rodriguez, the station's security chief. His face was grim. "Morales, we need to talk, now." Matthew stepped into the corridor, Fornax's growls echoing behind him. "Do you have any idea what you're dealing with?" Rodriguez hissed. "Last time, an Arcturian went into heat on this station. We had to quarantine an entire deck. Their pheromones spread through the ventilation system, affecting every male on board, human and alien alike." As if on cue, a group of male crew members stumbled past, their eyes glazed and nostrils flaring. They pressed against the transparent walls of Matthew's office, staring at Fornax with undisguised hunger. The station's AI chimed in, its voice unnaturally strained. "Warning! Pheromone levels in Sector 7 reaching critical concentration. Life support systems may be compromised if levels continue to rise." Matthew's comm implant crackled to life, bypassing the need for an external device. It was a priority message from Earth Command. "Morales, the fate of humanity rests on your negotiations with the Zeta Reticuli. Their faster-than-light drive technology could change the balance of power in the galaxy. Failure is not an option." As the message ended, Matthew locked eyes with Fornax through the office wall. Her pupils had expanded to cover her entire eye, and her claws left deep gouges in his desk as she paced. Matthew Morales, 35-year-old human executive at Galactic Enterprises, stood in the corridor of a space station on the brink of chaos. His alien secretary was in heat, his crew was losing control, and the future of humanity hung in the balance. He had 2 Earth weeks to complete the most important negotiation of his career, all while managing an increasingly possessive Arcturian and preventing Nexus 7 from descending into pheromone-induced madness. Welcome to just another day at the office in the galactic frontier. Matthew's mind raced as he processed the gravity of the situation. The pheromone-induced chaos threatened to engulf the entire station, jeopardizing not only the negotiations, but potentially the lives of everyone on board. He needed to act fast. "Rodriguez," Matthew said, his voice steady despite the turmoil. "I need you to contact Dr. Elias Ross immediately. Tell him to meet me at my office in 5 minutes." The security chief nodded, tapping his comm unit as he strode away. Matthew turned back to his office, where Fornax paced like a caged predator. Her violet skin glistened with a thin sheen of sweat, and her chest heaved with each ragged breath. Dr. Ross arrived promptly, his silver hair disheveled and his lab coat wrinkled. "Mr. Morales, I came as soon as I could. What's the situation?" Matthew gestured towards Fornax. "We need a way to suppress her pheromones, and fast. Can you create some kind of neutralizing agent?" The xenobiologist's eyes widened as he observed Fornax's state. "It's possible, but it won't be easy. Arcturian biology is complex, and their mating cycle is unlike anything we've seen before. I'll need several hours in the lab to develop an effective solution." Do what you can, Matthew replied. We don't have much time. As Dr. Ross hurried off to his lab, Matthew turned his attention to containing the immediate threat. He approached Fornax cautiously, hands raised in a placating gesture. Fornax, we need to move. It's not safe here. The Arcturian's eyes locked onto him, a mix of confusion and primal hunger swirling in their depths. Matthew pointed to the door, then to himself, and finally to Fornax, hoping she would understand his intent. Fornax tilted her head, then nodded slowly. Matthew breathed a sigh of relief and led her out of the office. They made their way through the corridors, avoiding the growing number of affected crew members who staggered about in a pheromone-induced haze. Finally, they reached a secure conference room. Matthew ushered Fornax inside, then activated the room's advanced air filtration system. The low hum of machinery filled the air as it began scrubbing the pheromones from the atmosphere. Matthew turned to Fornax, who watched him with an intensity that made his skin crawl. He pointed to himself, then to the floor, and finally made a staying motion with his hands. I need you to stay here, Fornax. It's important. The Arcturian's face contorted in what Matthew could only assume was frustration. Suddenly, she lunged forward, powerful arms reaching for him. Matthew's Earth Defense Force training kicked in instinctively. He sidestepped her grasp, using her momentum to guide her past him. In one fluid motion, he gently but firmly pinned her arms behind her back. I'm sorry, Fornax, he said, knowing she couldn't understand his words, but hoping his tone would convey his sincerity. This is for your own good. As he released her, his comm implant crackled to life. Morales, Commander Rodriguez's voice rang out. We've got a situation. The pheromones are spreading faster than we anticipated. We're implementing quarantine protocols now, but it's not looking good. Before Matthew could respond, another call came through. The stern face of Admiral Helena Zhao appeared in his mind's eye, courtesy of his neural interface. Mr. Morales, we have an urgent development. The Zeta Reticuli delegation has arrived ahead of schedule and is demanding an immediate meeting. I don't need to remind you how crucial these negotiations are for humanity's future in the galactic community. Matthew's heart raced. He glanced at Fornax, who had retreated to a corner of the room, her eyes never leaving him. Then he looked at the state-of-the-art holographic projectors built into the conference room's walls. An idea began to form. Admiral, he said, inform the Zeta Reticuli that we'll conduct the negotiations via holographic communication. I'll handle it from my current location. Admiral Zhao's eyebrows shot up. That's highly unorthodox, Morales. The Zeta Reticuli are known for their preference for face-to-face interactions. It's our only option given the current circumstances, Matthew insisted. I'll make it work. As the Admiral reluctantly agreed and ended the call, Matthew's comm implant chimed again. It was Dr. Ross. Mr. Morales, we've hit a snag. The Arcturian pheromones are more complex than we initially thought. It's going to take longer than expected to develop an effective neutralizing agent. Matthew's mind raced, considering his options. He looked at Fornax again, noting how the Zeta Reticuli delegate's holographic forms would materialize mere feet from her. An audacious plan began to take shape. Understood, Doctor. Keep working on it, Matthew said, ending the call. He approached the room's control panel and began calibrating the holographic projectors. If he could position Fornax just right, her pheromones might subtly influence the Zeta Reticuli delegates, potentially making them more receptive to Earth's proposals. As Matthew finalized the preparations, he realized the enormity of what he was about to attempt. He was gambling with the future of humanity, all while trying to manage a station on the brink of pheromone-induced chaos and an increasingly unstable Arcturian. The holographic projectors hummed to life, and the air shimmered as the forms of the Zeta Reticuli delegates began to take shape. Matthew straightened his tie and took a deep breath. It was time to put his plan into action. Greetings, esteemed delegates of the Zeta Reticuli Trade Federation, Matthew began, his voice steady despite the tumult in his mind. On behalf of Earth and the United Terran Colonies, I welcome you to these negotiations. As the alien diplomats responded, their subtle movements indicating curiosity about the unusual setting, Matthew noticed their nostrils flaring slightly. He glanced at Fornax, who watched the proceedings with an unreadable expression. The negotiations had begun, and with them, a high-stakes game of interstellar diplomacy, unlike any Matthew had ever experienced. The next few hours would determine not only his fate, but potentially the future of humanity in the vast, complex tapestry of galactic civilization. As the holographic forms of the Zeta Reticuli delegates materialized in the conference room, Matthew's confidence in his plan began to waver. The reptilian aliens, with their scale-covered skin and vertical slit pupils, seemed unperturbed by the pheromones permeating the air. Instead, their nostrils flared in what appeared to be irritation rather than interest. "Esteemed delegates," Matthew began, his voice steady despite the growing knot in his stomach. "I appreciate your willingness to conduct these negotiations via hologram. I assure you, this method will not impede our discussions." The lead Zeta Reticuli delegate, a tall figure with iridescent green scales, tilted its head. "Human Morales, this arrangement is unusual. We detect an unfamiliar scent in your environment. Explain." Matthew's mind raced. He glanced at Fornax, who had retreated to a corner of the room, her violet skin pulsating with an otherworldly glow. "Ah, yes, you have a keen sense of smell. What you're detecting is a rare earth plant we keep in our negotiation rooms. It's known for its calming properties during high-stress discussions." The delegates exchanged looks, their forked tongues flicking out to taste the air. "Interesting," the lead delegate hissed. "We find it unsettling." Swallowing hard, Matthew forged ahead. "I assure you, it's harmless. Now let's discuss Earth's proposal for the faster-than-light drive technology exchange." As Matthew began outlining the details of the proposed deal, alarms suddenly blared throughout the station. The holographic images of the Zeta Reticuli flickered as the room's emergency lights activated. Commander Rodriguez's voice crackled over the intercom. "Attention all personnel. This is a station-wide lockdown. I repeat, station-wide lockdown. All non-essential personnel are to remain in their quarters until further notice." The lead Zeta Reticuli delegate's eyes narrowed to thin slits. "Human Morales, what is the meaning of this interruption?" Matthew's heart pounded in his chest. He opened his mouth to respond, but Fornax chose that moment to lunge toward the holographic projectors, her clawed hands swiping through the ethereal forms of the aliens. "My apologies," Matthew said, stepping between Fornax and the projectors. "We're experiencing some minor technical difficulties. Nothing to be concerned about." The delegate's agitation was palpable, even through the holographic interface. "Your explanation is insufficient. We demand to know the true nature of these disturbances." Before Matthew could formulate a response, his neural implant chimed. Dr. Ross's voice filled his mind. "Mr. Morales, I've made progress on the neutralizing agent, but I need a key component, a sample of Zeta Reticuli pheromones. Their biochemistry could be the key to counteracting Fornax's emissions." A plan formed in Matthew's mind. He turned back to the delegates, forcing a smile. "Esteemed representatives of the Zeta Reticuli Trade Federation, I apologize for the irregularities in our meeting. In the spirit of transparency and as a sign of good faith, I propose we engage in a standard Earth diplomatic procedure for first-time negotiations." The aliens' interest seemed piqued. "Explain this procedure, Human Morales." "It's quite simple," Matthew continued, his voice steady despite the chaos unfolding around him. "We exchange biological data as a symbol of trust and to ensure compatibility in future interactions. Would you be willing to transmit a sample of your pheromone data through our holographic interface?" The delegates conferred among themselves, their sibilant whispers barely audible. Finally, the lead delegate nodded. "We find your request unusual, but acceptable. Transmitting data now." As the holographic interface hummed with the incoming information, Matthew quickly forwarded it to Dr. Ross. "I've got it, Doctor. How soon can you synthesize the neutralizing agent?" "I'll need at least an hour," Ross replied. "But Matthew, the situation on the station is deteriorating rapidly. We've got reports of fights breaking out, and critical systems are starting to malfunction due to neglect." Matthew's stomach churned. He glanced at the chronometer on the wall, acutely aware of how little time he had left to secure the deal and save the station. Suddenly, a new voice cut through the chaos. Nexus 7, this is Captain Lyra Tazil of the Andromeda Galactic Peacekeepers. We've received your automated distress signal and are preparing to dock. Prepare for our arrival. The blood drained from Matthew's face. The Peacekeepers' arrival could derail everything. He turned back to the Zeta Reticuli delegates, who were growing more impatient by the second. Human Morales, the lead delegate hissed. Our patience wears thin. We demand a full explanation of these events, or we will terminate these negotiations immediately. Matthew took a deep breath, his mind racing. He looked at Fornax, whose eyes were now glowing with an intense alien light. He thought of the station's crew, struggling against the effects of the pheromones. He considered the approaching peacekeepers and the crucial technology Earth needed. In that moment, Matthew Morales made a decision that would either secure humanity's future in the galaxy or doom them to isolation. He turned to the holographic delegates, his face set with drive. Esteemed delegates of the Zeta Reticuli Trade Federation, I have a revised proposal that I believe will interest you greatly. Earth is prepared to offer you exclusive rights to our newly developed pheromone control technology in exchange for the faster-than-light drive. The delegates' eyes widened, their forked tongues flicking out rapidly in excitement. Pheromone control technology? This is unexpected. Tell us more, Human Morales. As Matthew began to elaborate on the non-existent technology, he silently prayed that Dr. Ross would come through with the neutralizing agent. The station's fate, the crucial technology exchange, and humanity's standing in the galactic community now rested on his ability to maintain this precarious balancing act. With Captain Teasel's ship beginning its docking sequence and Fornax's behavior growing increasingly erratic, Matthew steeled himself for the challenges ahead. The next few minutes would determine everything, and he was walking a tightrope with no safety net. Time seemed to slow as Matthew watched the Zeta Reticuli delegates, their scaled faces a mask of suspicion and growing impatience. Suddenly, his neural implant buzzed. Dr. Ross's voice filled his mind, breathless with excitement. Mr. Morales, we've done it. The neutralizing agent is ready. I'm dispersing it through the station's ventilation system now. Relief washed over Matthew, but he maintained his composure. Understood, Doctor. Keep me updated on the effects. The lead Zeta Reticuli delegate leaned forward, its vertical pupils narrowing. Human Morales, you seem distracted. Perhaps now you will provide a satisfactory explanation for these irregularities. Matthew opened his mouth to respond when a change in the room's atmosphere caught his attention. The air seemed to shimmer, and a faint, sweet scent filled his nostrils. He glanced at Fornax, noticing her rapid blinking and the gradual fading of the otherworldly glow in her eyes. Esteemed delegates, Matthew began, his mind racing to formulate a new strategy. What you're witnessing is a demonstration of the very technology I mentioned earlier. He gestured toward Fornax, who was now looking around the room in confusion. As you can see, our pheromone control system is capable of neutralizing even the most potent biochemical influences. The delegates exchanged glances, their forked tongues flicking out to taste the altered air. Intriguing, the lead delegate hissed. This technology seems more advanced than we initially assumed. Seizing the moment, Matthew tapped his neural implant, opening a secure channel to Admiral Helena Zhao. Admiral, we have a unique opportunity here. Request permission to negotiate a technology exchange and non-aggression pact with the Zeta Reticuli. Admiral Zhao's response was immediate. Granted, Mr. Morales, but tread carefully. The stakes have never been higher. Matthew turned back to the delegates, his posture radiating confidence. Allow me to present a revised proposal. Earth is prepared to share our pheromone control technology in exchange for your faster-than-light drive schematics and a non-aggression pact between our species. The lead delegate's scales shimmered with interest. Your offer is compelling. However, we require more concrete evidence of this technology's efficacy. Before Matthew could respond, a new voice cut through the tension. Nexus 7, this is Captain Lyra Tazil of the Andromeda Galactic Peacekeepers. We are commencing docking procedures. Prepare to be boarded. Matthew's mind raced. The arrival of the Peacekeepers could derail everything, but it might also present an opportunity. He made a split-second decision. Esteemed delegates, I propose we invite Captain Teasel to join our negotiations as a neutral third party. The Andromeda Galactic Peacekeepers are known throughout the galaxy for their fairness in interstellar disputes. The Zeta Reticuli delegates conferred briefly before the leader nodded. We find this acceptable. Matthew quickly arranged for Captain Teasel to join the holographic conference. Moments later, the imposing figure of the female Andromeda materialized in the room. Her silver skin gleamed under the artificial light, and her forearms were crossed in a posture of authority. I demand an explanation for the distress signal, Captain Teasel stated, her voice resonating with a metallic undertone. Matthew stepped forward. Captain Teasel, we appreciate your prompt response. As you can see, the situation is under control. In fact, you've arrived at a fortuitous moment. We're in the midst of negotiating a technology exchange that could have far-reaching implications for galactic peace. Teasel's luminous eyes narrowed. Explain. Over the next hour, Matthew orchestrated a complex diplomatic dance. He detailed the recent pheromone crisis, Earth's rapid response, and the potential applications of the pheromone control technology in peacekeeping efforts across the galaxy. As he spoke, Matthew noticed subtle changes in the delegates' behavior. The Zeta Reticuli leaned forward, their earlier suspicion replaced by genuine interest. Captain Teasel's rigid posture softened slightly, her lower arms uncrossing as she listened intently. Fornax, now fully recovered, quietly approached Matthew. Sir, I've compiled some relevant data that might be useful in your negotiations, she whispered, her voice tinged with embarrassment. Matthew nodded gratefully, realizing how valuable her expertise could be in this situation. Thank you, Fornax. Your assistance is greatly appreciated. Turning back to the assembled aliens, Matthew took a deep breath. It was time to take a calculated risk. I'd like to propose an expanded agreement, he began, feeling the weight of Earth's future on his shoulders. In addition to the technology exchange with the Zeta Reticuli, I suggest a joint research initiative between Earth, the Zeta Reticuli, and the Andromeda Galactic Peacekeepers. Together, we can further develop and apply this pheromone control technology for the benefit of all species in the galaxy. The room fell silent as the implications of his proposal sank in. Matthew held his breath, acutely aware that the next few moments could reshape humanity's place in the galactic community. Captain Teasel was the first to speak. Your proposal is intriguing, Human Morales. The potential applications for conflict resolution are significant. The lead Zeta Reticuli delegate nodded slowly. We concur. Such an alliance could strengthen our respective positions in galactic politics. As discussions intensified, Matthew felt a surge of cautious optimism. He was on the verge of securing not only the faster-than-light drive technology, but also elevating humanity's standing among the stars. Yet he knew the negotiations were nowhere near the end. The real challenge lay in balancing the complex interests of all involved parties and transforming this ambitious vision into reality. As he prepared to delve into the intricate details of the proposed agreements, Matthew caught Fornax's eye. The Arcturian gave him a small smile, and he felt a newfound appreciation for her resilience and professionalism. With renewed drive, Matthew turned back to the assembled aliens. The next few hours would determine the course of human history, and he was ready to navigate the treacherous waters of interstellar diplomacy. The fate of humanity's interstellar future hung in the balance, and Matthew was determined to see it through. Just as he prepared to delve into the finer points of the proposed agreements, a shrill alarm pierced the air. Red warning lights flashed across the holographic displays, casting an eerie glow over the assembled delegates. What's happening? Matthew demanded, tapping his neural implant to access the station's systems. Fornax's fingers flew over her datapad. Long-range sensors have detected an incoming vessel, she reported, her voice tight with concern. It's an Arcturian battlecruiser. Matthew's blood ran cold. He turned to the Zeta Reticuli delegates, whose scaled faces had contorted into expressions of alarm. Captain Teasel's forearms tensed, her silver skin reflecting the pulsing red lights. Explain this immediately, Human Morales, the Andromeda Peacekeeper demanded. Before Matthew could respond, a booming voice filled the command center. Nexus 7, This is Admiral Zixthor of the Arcturian Sovereignty. We are responding to a distress signal from one of our citizens. Prepare for our immediate docking. Fornax gasped, her luminous eyes widening. That's my father, she whispered, her usual composure cracking. Matthew's mind raced. The delicate diplomatic balance he had worked so hard to achieve was teetering on the brink of collapse. He could see the Zeta Reticuli delegates exchanging worried glances, their earlier enthusiasm waning rapidly. Captain Teasel stepped forward, her metallic voice tinged with concern. In light of this development, I suggest we suspend negotiations until this situation is perseveranced. The potential for interspecies conflict is too great to ignore. The lead Zeta Reticuli delegate nodded in agreement. We concur. We have no desire to be caught in the crossfire of an Arcturian dispute. Matthew felt the situation slipping through his fingers. He had to act fast. Wait, he said, his voice cutting through the tension. I have a proposal that could not only perseverance this situation, but also demonstrate the effectiveness of our pheromone control technology. All eyes turned to him. Matthew tapped his neural implant, opening a channel to Dr. Ross. Doctor, how quickly can you modify the neutralizing agent to mimic Arcturian emotional cues, specifically calmness and trust? Give me 10 minutes, Ross replied, the sound of frantic typing in the background. Matthew turned back to the assembled aliens. Esteemed delegates, Captain Teasel, I propose we use this opportunity to showcase the practical applications of our technology. With your permission, we'll deploy a modified version of the pheromone control system to diffuse the situation with the Arcturians. Captain Teasel's luminous eyes narrowed. A bold move, human Morales, but the risks are significant. As are the potential rewards, Matthew countered. If successful, it will prove the viability of our proposed joint research initiative. After a tense moment, the captain nodded. Proceed, but be warned, if this goes poorly, the consequences will be severe. Matthew turned to Fornax, who was visibly struggling to maintain her professional demeanor. Fornax, I need your help. Your knowledge of Arcturian biology and social cues will be crucial. She nodded, squaring her shoulders. Of course, Mr. Morales. What do you need? As they worked with Dr. Ross to fine-tune the pheromone formula, Matthew could feel the weight of multiple alien gazes upon him. The next few minutes would determine not just the outcome of these negotiations, but potentially the course of human history. Finally, Dr. Ross's voice crackled through the neural implant. It's ready. Deploying now. Matthew took a deep breath, steeling himself. Let's go greet our new guests, he said, gesturing for Fornax, Captain Teasel, and representatives from the Zeta Reticuli delegation to follow him. As they made their way to the docking bay, Matthew could already feel a subtle shift in the air. The modified pheromones were odorless to humans, but he noticed Fornax's antennae twitching slightly. The massive doors of the docking bay slid open, revealing the imposing figure of Admiral Zixthor. The Arcturian towered over them, his iridescent exoskeleton gleaming under the harsh lights. His multifaceted eyes blazed with fury as he swept his gaze across the welcoming party. Where is my daughter? He demanded, his voice reverberating through the cavernous space. I demand an explanation for this outrage. Matthew stepped forward, forcing himself to remain calm. Admiral Zixthor, welcome to Nexus 7. I assure you, there's been a misunderstanding. Your daughter is safe and well. Fornax moved to stand beside Matthew. Father, I'm here. There's no need for alarm. The Admiral's eyes widened in surprise, then narrowed suspiciously. Fornax, what is the meaning of this? We received your distress signal. As Matthew launched into an explanation of the accidental signal in the events that followed, he noticed a gradual change in the Admiral's demeanor. The initial hostility began to fade, replaced by a cautious curiosity. You say this was all caused by an unknown pheromone? Zixthor asked, his tone softer than before. Matthew nodded. Yes, Admiral. And it led to an unexpected breakthrough in pheromone control technology. A technology we're now discussing, sharing with other species for the greater good of the galaxy. The Admiral's antenna twitched, mirroring his daughter's earlier reaction. Intriguing. And you managed to neutralize these effects so quickly? Indeed, Captain Teasdale interjected, her metallic voice carrying a note of admiration. The humans have demonstrated remarkable adaptability and diplomatic skill in this crisis. As the conversation continued, Matthew could see the Zeta Reticuli delegates becoming more engaged. The earlier tension had dissipated, replaced by a palpable sense of excitement at the possibilities this technology presented. Seizing the moment, Matthew made his pitch. Admiral Zixthor, we'd like to propose expanding our joint research initiative to include the Arcturians. Your species' advanced biological knowledge would be invaluable in refining this technology. The Admiral's multifaceted eyes gleamed with interest. A collaborative effort between humans, Zeta Reticuli, Andromedans, and Arcturians? Unprecedented. Captain Teasdale nodded approvingly. Such cooperation could serve as a model for future interspecies relations. The Andromeda galactic peacekeepers would be honored to oversee the ethical application of this technology. As the group made their way back to the command center to resume negotiations, Matthew felt a surge of cautious optimism. What had started as a potential disaster had transformed into an opportunity for unparalleled galactic cooperation. He glanced at Fornax, who was deep in conversation with her father. She caught his eye and gave him a small smile, filled with gratitude and something more, a deepening connection that transcended their professional relationship. Matthew returned the smile, then turned his attention back to the task at hand. The real work was just beginning. He had to navigate the complex web of interspecies interests, balance Earth's technological ambitions with the newfound potential for galactic cooperation, and somehow keep this fragile alliance from fracturing. As they entered the command center, now crowded with representatives from 4 different species, Matthew took a deep breath. The next few hours would shape the future of humanity among the stars. He stepped forward, ready to begin the next phase of negotiations that could redefine Earth's place in the galaxy. The next several hours passed in a flurry of intense negotiations, with Matthew at the center of a whirlwind of alien diplomacy. He navigated the complex web of interspecies interest with skill and finesse, drawing on every ounce of his diplomatic training and intuition. As the talks entered their final phase, Matthew orchestrated a series of proposals that would reshape humanity's place in the cosmos. He turned to the Zeta Reticuli delegates, their scaled faces impassive as he spoke. In exchange for our pheromone control technology, we propose a full technology transfer of your faster-than-light drive systems, Matthew said, his voice steady despite the gravity of the moment. The lead Zeta Reticuli delegate chittered softly, conferring with his companions before responding. Your offer is acceptable, human Morales. We agree to these terms. A ripple of excitement passed through the human contingent, but Matthew maintained his composure. He turned to Admiral Zixthor, whose multifaceted eyes gleamed with interest. Admiral, we invite the Arcturians to join a joint research initiative to refine and expand the applications of the pheromone technology. Your expertise in advanced biology would be invaluable to this project. Zixthor's antenna twitched thoughtfully. An intriguing proposition. The Arcturian sovereignty accepts your offer of collaboration. Matthew nodded, then addressed Captain Teasdale. And to ensure the ethical use of this technology across the galaxy, we request that the Andromeda galactic peacekeepers oversee its implementation and regulation. Teasdale's metallic voice carried a note of approval. A wise precaution, human Morales. The peacekeepers would be honored to take on this responsibility. As the final details were hammered out, Matthew felt a surge of pride. He had done it. Earth was about to take its place among the advanced civilizations of the galaxy. His neural implant chimed, signaling an incoming transmission. Mr. Morales, Admiral Helena Zhao's voice rang in his mind. I've been monitoring the proceedings. Your work here has been nothing short of extraordinary. She paused, her next words filling Matthew with a mix of shock and elation. It gives me great pleasure to inform you that, effective immediately, you are promoted to the position of Earth's first galactic ambassador. As the negotiations concluded and the various delegations prepared to depart, Matthew found himself alone with Fornax for the first time since the crisis began. They stood in a quiet corner of the command center, the bustle of activity providing a backdrop to their conversation. "I wanted to thank you," Fornax said, her luminous eyes meeting his. "Your understanding and support during my vulnerable state meant more than I can express." Matthew smiled warmly. "You don't need to thank me, Fornax. Your expertise was crucial to our success here. Your professionalism in the face of personal embarrassment was truly admirable." As they gazed at each other, the air between them seemed to crackle with unspoken emotion. But before either could speak further, Matthew's neural implant blared an urgent alert. "Warning, critical system breach detected, life support systems compromised, data integrity at risk." Matthew's blood ran cold. He tapped his implant, accessing the station's security feeds. "This is a coordinated cyber attack," he realized aloud, "and it's targeting the faster-than-light drive schematics." Fornax's antennae twitched in alarm. "We need to act fast. I can help counter this attack." Matthew nodded, his mind already racing. He opened a station-wide channel. "Attention all personnel and delegates. We are under cyber attack. I need Dr. Ross, Commander Rodriguez, and representatives from each alien species to report to the main control room immediately." As the crisis team assembled, Matthew briefed them on the situation. "We're dealing with a human supremacist faction opposed to alien cooperation. They're trying to destroy our newly acquired FTL data and disable the station's life support." Dr. Ross's fingers flew over a holographic interface. "They've bypassed our primary firewalls. We need a new approach. Perhaps a combination of our technologies could create a more robust defense," suggested the Zeta Reticuli representative. Matthew nodded. "Excellent idea. Fornax, can you interface with Nexus 7 systems to give us an edge?" Fornax was already connecting her neural implant to the station's mainframe. "I'm in. Let's show these hackers what real technological cooperation looks like." What followed was a dazzling display of interspecies teamwork. The Arcturians provided advanced data encryption algorithms, while the Zeta Reticuli contributed quantum computing techniques. Captain Tzil offered Andromeda Peacekeeper cyber warfare tactics, which Dr. Ross integrated with Earth's latest AI defense systems. At the center of it all, Matthew and Fornax worked in perfect synchronization. They anticipated each other's moves, completing each other's commands before they were even voiced. Their seamless coordination drew admiring glances from both humans and aliens alike. After a tense battle in the digital realm, Matthew announced, "We've done it. The attack has been repelled." A cheer went up from the assembled team, but their celebration was short-lived. Alarms blared throughout the station, and the lights flickered ominously. "What now?" Matthew demanded, turning to the nearest status display. Fornax's face paled. "The hackers managed to sabotage the main reactor before we shut them out. We're looking at a potential meltdown." The gravity of the situation hit Matthew like a physical blow. They had repelled the cyber attack, but at what cost? Now, not only was the hard-won diplomatic breakthrough at risk, but the lives of everyone on Nexus 7 hung in the balance. As the station shuddered around them, Matthew knew he had to act fast. The fate of Earth's newfound place in the galactic community, and the lives of everyone on board, depended on his next moves. "Initiate emergency evacuation protocols," he ordered, his voice steady despite the chaos. "We need to get everyone off this station now." As alarms blared and crew members rushed to their evacuation stations, Matthew turned to face the assembled alien delegates. The weight of Earth's future rested heavily on his shoulders as he prepared to navigate this new crisis. Crisis. Matthew's mind raced, weighing their options as the station shuddered around them. "We can't leave yet," he said, his voice cutting through the chaos. "The faster-than-light drive data is still in the shielded compartment. Without it, everything we've accomplished here is for nothing." Fornax's luminous eyes widened. "You're right. We need to retrieve it." Matthew turned to the assembled alien delegates. "Please proceed with the evacuation. Captain Tzil, can you oversee the process?" The Andromeda Peacekeeper nodded, her metallic voice resolute. "Affirmative. We will ensure all personnel are safely evacuated." "Dr. Ross," Matthew continued, Coordinate with the alien representatives to secure all other sensitive data. Fornax and I will retrieve the FTL drive schematics. As the others rushed to carry out their tasks, Matthew and Fornax shared a determined look. Without another word, they sprinted towards the heart of the failing station. The corridors of Nexus 7 had transformed into a treacherous maze. Emergency force fields flickered in and out of existence, forcing them to duck, weave, and backtrack. Matthew's neural implant struggled to maintain a connection with the station systems, providing intermittent updates on the deteriorating conditions. "Watch out," Fornax cried as a section of ceiling collapsed in front of them. Matthew pulled her back just in time, debris crashing where they had stood moments before. They pressed on, climbing over fallen beams and crawling through narrow gaps. The station's artificial gravity fluctuated wildly, causing them to stumble and float unpredictably. Matthew's military training kicked in as he adapted to the changing conditions, guiding Fornax through the chaos. "Like this," he instructed, demonstrating how to push off surfaces to control their movement in low gravity. Fornax caught on quickly, her natural grace complementing his practiced efficiency. As they approached the data storage area, a deafening hiss filled the air. A coolant pipe had ruptured, spraying corrosive liquid across their path. The acrid smell burned their nostrils, and Matthew could see the metal floor sizzling where the coolant touched it. Without hesitation, he shrugged off his uniform jacket. "We'll use this as a shield," he explained, holding it up. "Stay close to me." Together they dashed through the hazardous spray, the jacket providing just enough protection to get them safely to the other side. Fornax's exoskeleton smoked slightly, but she seemed unharmed. "Thank you," she said, her antennae twitching with what Matthew had come to recognize as admiration. They reached the sealed compartment housing the FTL data, only to find the security system damaged by the station's deterioration. The manual override required simultaneous activation from 2 control panels on opposite sides of the room. "I'll take the left," Matthew said, moving to position. Fornax nodded, heading to the right panel. "On my mark," he called out. 3, 2, 1, now." They input the override codes in perfect sync, their movements mirroring each other across the room. The compartment hissed open, revealing the data storage device containing the precious FTL drive schematics. As Matthew retrieved the device, the station's computer blared an urgent warning. "Alert! Reactor meltdown accelerating. Time to critical failure. 9 minutes, 47 seconds. Fornax's face paled. "We need to move. Fast." They sprinted back through the crumbling station, heading for the nearest functional transmission array. Entire sections of Nexus 7 were collapsing around them, forcing them to navigate an increasingly treacherous path. They reached a section where the outer hull had been breached. Only a thin emergency force field separated them from the vacuum of space. Stars and debris from the disintegrating station swirled beyond the shimmering barrier. "We have to cross," Matthew said, his voice tight. "It's the only way to reach the array in time." Fornax nodded, her expression a mix of fear and commitment. They stepped onto the exposed deck, the force field humming ominously beneath their feet. Each step felt like an eternity as they traversed the gap, the vastness of space yawning beneath them. They made it across just as the force field flickered and failed, the vacuum of space swallowing the section behind them. Reaching the transmission array, they discovered a new problem. The main power coupling had been severed, leaving a sparking gap in the circuitry. "We need to complete the circuit manually," Fornax said, assessing the damage. "But the power surge, it could be fatal." Matthew didn't hesitate. "I'll do it. Your Arcturian physiology is more vulnerable to electrical damage." "Matthew, no." "There's no time to argue," he insisted, already moving into position. "Just be ready to transmit the data the moment I make the connection." Gritting his teeth, Matthew grasped the live coupling. Pain seared through his body as electricity coursed through him, but he held on. Fornax worked frantically at the console, her fingers flying over the controls as she established the connection and began the data transfer. Seconds stretched into an eternity for Matthew as he fought to maintain his grip. His vision blurred, his muscles spasming, but still he held on. "It's done!" Fornax cried. "Matthew, let go!" He released the coupling, collapsing to the floor. Fornax was at his side instantly, helping him to his feet. His body ached and his left hand was badly burned, but he was alive. "We need to get to the escape pods," he managed to say, leaning heavily on Fornax for support. They stumbled through the disintegrating station, the computer's voice counting down their remaining time. They reached the last functional escape pod with less than 2 minutes to spare. Matthew's strength was fading fast. Fornax practically carried him into the pod, securing him in one of the seats. As she turned to strap herself in, a violent tremor shook the station. Fornax lost her balance, tumbling out of the pod. The final stage of the reactor meltdown had begun. The station was literally tearing itself apart around them. "Fornax!" Matthew cried, reaching for her. She met his eyes, a look of resignation crossing her features. Her hand moved towards the pod's launch controls. "No!" With a surge of adrenaline, Matthew lunged forward. His burned hand screamed in protest as he grabbed Fornax's arm, pulling her into the pod with all his remaining strength. The pod's door sealed shut just as Nexus 7 began to explode. The launch sequence initiated automatically, propelling them away from the doomed station. But they weren't safe yet. The blast wave from the station's destruction caught up with them, sending the tiny pod tumbling end over end through space. Inside, Matthew and Fornax clung to each other, their bodies pressed together in the cramped confines of the escape vessel. As the pod spun wildly, Matthew looked into Fornax's eyes. Despite the chaos around them, he felt an overwhelming sense of connection. They had faced death together and emerged stronger for it. The pod's emergency beacon activated, sending out a distress signal. As they drifted into the void, their fates uncertain, Matthew realized that his mission had evolved into something far more personal. Whatever challenges lay ahead, he knew that he and Fornax would face them together. Together as a single unit. The pod's wild tumbling slowed, giving way to a gentler spin as emergency stabilizers engaged with a soft hum. As the chaos subsided, Matthew found himself face-to-face with Fornax, their bodies still intertwined from the frantic moments of escape. Her luminous eyes met his, and in that instant a wordless understanding passed between them. They had survived against impossible odds, forging a connection that transcended their vastly different origins. Matthew felt the warmth of her exoskeleton against his skin, the rhythmic pulsing of her bioluminescent patterns, matching the rapid beating of his own heart. The moment was shattered by a burst of static from the pod's communication system. Admiral Zixthor's metallic voice filled the cramped space, tinged with both relief and urgency. "Ambassador Reeves, Liaison Fornax, do you copy? Our sensors have locked onto your pod's beacon. The Arcturian battlecruiser, Starfire, and Captain Teasel's peacekeeping vessel are en route to your location. Estimated time of arrival, 17 minutes. Matthew reached for the comm panel, wincing as pain shot through his burned hand. "Copy that, Admiral. We're alive and mostly intact." As the adrenaline of their escape faded, the reality of their injuries set in. Matthew's left hand was an angry red, blistered from the electrical surge. Fornax's exoskeleton showed scorch marks and hairline cracks from their harrowing journey through the disintegrating station. "Let me see that," Fornax said softly, gently taking Matthew's injured hand in hers. From a compartment in her exoskeleton, she produced a small vial of iridescent gel. "This is a regenerative compound we use for minor injuries. It should help with the pain and start the healing process." As she carefully applied the cool gel to his burns, Matthew marveled at the contradiction of her touch, simultaneously alien and comforting. The pain began to subside almost immediately, replaced by a tingling sensation as the Arcturian medicine went to work. "Thank you," Matthew said, flexing his fingers experimentally. "I don't know how you managed to keep that intact through everything." Fornax's antenna twitched in what Matthew had come to recognize as an Arcturian smile. A diplomat is always prepared, even for the unexpected. They spent the next few minutes tending to each other's wounds and recounting their narrow escape. The realization of how close they had come to failure and death made their success all the sweeter. "We did it," Matthew said, his voice filled with wonder. "We saved the FTL data, we got out alive, and we've opened the door to a new era of interstellar cooperation. Fornax nodded, her skin shifting to a warm golden hue that Matthew associated with pride and satisfaction. It's more than that, Matthew. We've proven that humans and Arcturians can work together seamlessly, as true equals. The implications for future diplomatic relations are... Her words were cut short by a shrill alarm from the pod's sensor array. A holographic display flickered to life, showing a sleek, unfamiliar craft rapidly approaching their position. "That's not the rescue ships," Matthew said, tension creeping back into his voice. "Can you identify it?" Fornax's fingers danced over the controls, her brow furrowed in concentration. "Negative. The design doesn't match any known human or allied species vessels in my database." Before they could speculate further, a bright beam of energy enveloped their pod. The mysterious ship had locked onto them with a tractor beam, pulling them inexorably towards its docking bay. "We're being boarded," Matthew said, his military training kicking in. He quickly scanned the pod for anything that could be used as a weapon, coming up empty. "Get behind me. If they're hostile, I'll try to..." The pod's door hissed open, cutting off Matthew's words. He tensed, ready to defend Fornax with his bare hands if necessary. But instead of an alien threat, they were greeted by a familiar, bespectacled face. "Dr. Ross," Matthew and Fornax exclaimed in unison. The xenobiologist grinned, looking simultaneously exhausted and exhilarated. "Sorry for the scare, but I couldn't risk broadcasting on an open channel. Come quickly, we don't have much time." As they scrambled out of the pod, Dr. Ross explained breathlessly, "I've been working on a prototype FTL shuttle based on fragments of data from our earlier negotiations. When Nexus 7's distress signal went out, I knew I had to act. This is the maiden voyage of humanity's first faster-than-light vessel." Matthew's eyes widened as he took in the shuttle's interior. It was a hodgepodge of human and alien technology, with exposed wiring and hastily welded panels, giving it a distinctly experimental look. "Is it safe?" Fornax asked, her antennae twitching with a mix of curiosity and concern. Dr. Ross's grin widened. "Only one way to find out. Strap in, we're going home." As they secured themselves in the shuttle's makeshift seats, Dr. Ross's fingers flew over a console that looked like it had been cobbled together from a dozen different sources. The ship hummed to life, vibrating with almost unchecked energy. "Engaging FTL drive in 3, 2, 1. The stars outside the view screen blurred into streaks of light. Matthew felt a momentary sensation of weightlessness, followed by a pressure that seemed to compress every atom of his being. And then, as suddenly as it began, it was over. "My God," Matthew breathed, staring at the view screen in disbelief. The familiar blue marble of Earth hung before them, surrounded by a growing flotilla of ships. Dr. Ross let out a whoop of triumph. 23 minutes! We've just crossed a distance that would have taken our fastest ships months to traverse." As they approached Earth, their shuttle was quickly surrounded by an escort of sleek, advanced vessels, the pride of Earth's fleet. Matthew could see news drones darting between the ships, their cameras trained on the approaching FTL shuttle. A new voice crackled over the shuttle's comms. Admiral Helena Zhao, her tone a mixture of relief and almost unchecked excitement. "Ambassador Reeves, Liaison Fornax, Dr. Ross, on behalf of Earth and our allies, welcome home. You've done the impossible, and the galaxy will never be the same." As the shuttle docked with a secure orbital station, Matthew shared a look with Fornax. In her alien features, he saw reflected the same mix of exhaustion, exhilaration, and anticipation that he felt. Whatever came next, they would face it together, a living symbol of the new era they had helped to usher in. The shuttle's door opened, revealing a crowd of human and alien dignitaries waiting to greet them. Matthew took a deep breath, squared his shoulders, and stepped forward to meet the future they had fought so hard to secure.
You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.